Okay, please, good morning. I'm back. I hope
Good morning.
at least
Good morning,
now
sir.
quite a number of you have logged in, so it's okay. I would like to know if you have any question with regards to what we did last week or the previous lectures that we've had. If you have any concern, any question, you can ask before I proceed to today's lecture. Okay, so without any question, today we're going to look at health commodity procurement. So in a nutshell, we're going to look at procurement in general, but it will be linked to health procurement. That is the difference. So we're going to look at procurement in general. And when we talk of procurement, it's been defined, procurement is defined as a process of finding and agreeing to terms and acquiring goods, services, or works from an external source, often via a tendering or competitive bidding process. So if we take this definition, if we take the definition and explain it, you can see that when we talk of a process of finding, so in supply chain, the first what do you call it, stage is to identify a need. And the need may come from different functions or department within the organization. And so once those needs are identified, how do we satisfy or fulfill the need that have been identified? In fulfilling that need, you set out to find out how you're going to get the needed resources or materials to satisfy that need. And in doing so, you do that when you cannot produce the items in-house, when you cannot produce them yourself, you source them. And so by sourcing, you then look for suppliers who will be able to supply the items that have been identified. And so in finding, you look for suppliers, you screen them, and then you have a criteria, you have criteria that you're going to use to evaluate and then select them. After selecting them, then we move to the agreeing to terms. After selecting a supplier, you then enter into contract with the supplier. Before you enter into contract, there are terms that we have terms and conditions that you need to agree. Both of you must come into consensus before you proceed on with the contract. So with this agreeing to terms, it means that the supplier, both the supplier and the buyer have agreed to all the terms and conditions within the contract. And then you move on to acquire, that is, you move on to purchase the goods or services from an external source. So this time around, because it cannot be produced in-house, that is why you are procuring. And so you go looking for the items externally. And then this is often done through tendering or competitive bidding process. Why do we say that you do them via tendering? Per the Procurement Act. The Procurement Act stipulates that any government contract above 20,000 Ghana cedis must go through competitive tendering, must go through a tender for other suppliers to bid. And so any item above 20,000 that does not go through the tendering process often face problems, because if someone triggers it, you are going to be in trouble. And that is why some would deliberately change the contract, because between 19,999 and 20,000, there was just one person. So the person will just reduce the contract sum to that amount and then do it without it going through. And this is from the government, this is the public institutions. For private institutions, because of their own, they can decide to award them, they can decide to do them, but well-structured private institutions often follow this process. Like when you come to the Garden City University, for instance, though it's a private university, but we follow the Public Procurement Act, whereby anytime they are buying, the president, in our case, the president can sign up to 30,000. If the item is above 30,000 Ghana cedis, it has to go through, it has to pass through the procurement committee, and then the procurement committee will also use the same process by asking the procurement officer to look for invoices, to look for suppliers who will be able. And when it goes beyond certain threshold, that it also goes beyond like above 500,000, then the committee cannot also sit on it. It has to go to tender, which is a subcommittee of the University Council. They will decide. After the tendering committee, the tender committee, they can approve any amount because they work under the council. So the council will give them the go ahead. The council will approve it. Then the tender committee will go through the tendering process to select a bidder. And that is how it is. So when we talk of procurement, it means that it's a process of finding and agreeing to terms and acquiring goods and services. And that is why in supply chain, we try to separate procurement from purchasing. Most cases, these two words are used interchangeably, but in supply chain, they don't mean the same. Whereas the procurement is a process that starts from the beginning to the end, whereas the purchasing is a subset. The purchasing is the actual what do you call it, buying, when the buying. So you go through all the processes like that with the procurement. You go through the process of identification, selection, contracting, and then so when it gets to the acquisition of the good, that is where the purchasing comes in. And then the procurement will go further to do to receive the deliveries, and then the evaluation after the process has ended. You need to evaluate to see whether everything has gone on smoothly. And then when it comes to the tendering and bidding, you get it. Probably when we get it, and I'll explain it better. Because sometimes the word tender and are also used interchangeably, but they also mean they are also two different things. So let us look at the procurement cycle. The procurement cycle is also known as a procurement life cycle, purchasing cycle, or sourcing cycle. So the procurement cycle, we can talk about procurement life cycle, we can talk about the purchasing cycle, we can talk about sourcing. They mean the same. So procurement life cycle refers to all the steps involved in obtaining goods or services for your business. So when we talk of the procurement cycle, we are referring to the steps you go through in obtaining goods or services for your organization. And then the procurement life cycle has many steps, but these steps can be grouped into 5 broad categories. So you can have so many of them. You can have 10 steps. Some books, when you read, you have so many of them. But then we try to categorize them, try to group them into 5 phases. And these 5, what do you call it, stages that we've grouped them, if you want to expand them, you can get a lot of processes from each, what do you call it, stage. So the first stage is define and specify business needs. How do you define it? You want to procure items. you need to define the items you want to procure. What is the meaning of definition of items? For instance, in a facility, you may run out of certain drugs. You need certain items, like, let's say, let me use drugs, painkillers. We have different types of painkillers that you procure depending on the severity of the ailment. And so you will then decide which of them do we go for. So you have to define, if it is diclofenac that you are going for, define it, the specs. You need to define, you need to specify. Let the buyer, let the seller be aware of exactly what you want, so that, you see, if you are not straightforward and there is that kind of ambiguity, then the supplier will supply you anything. And at the end of the day, you may end up not, for instance, somebody raised a concern about a product in some facilities that are not frequently used. The ones that they need, they don't get them. But the ones that they don't use them often, that's what they get mostly. So what is the problem? Is it about the definition of the item, or is someone who wants to satisfy his or her personal interest and has refused to do the right thing? So you need to define and you give specifications for what you need. That is the first stage. The second stage is inviting suppliers to submit bids, a process known as tendering. So how do you invite suppliers? There are so many ways suppliers could be invited. Some may have registered suppliers. Some organization, before you supply them, you need to be a registered supplier with them. Some, you need to belong to certain, association or groups before you can be a supplier. So what the organization does is that they will just invite suppliers to submit bids, and this is what also known as tendering. When you talk of tendering, that is the invitation to submit bid. So they will send you the document and everything. Then in response, the seller will bid for the contract. So you invite suppliers and then you submit bids. Then evaluate and select suppliers. After inviting the supplier, the next step is to evaluate them. The evaluation process will be set by the organization. The organization will follow their own evaluation process. And then the criteria you're going to use to evaluate them should be known to the seller. So you would set a criteria. Sometimes you're looking at the financial capability, you're looking at the past task that they've performed, you're looking at the flexibility, you're looking at terms of payment. There are so many things you look out for before you use in evaluating a supplier. Then afterwards, after evaluating them, you pick the most appropriate supplier, the one you think can supply you with quality product. After selecting the supplier, you award them contract. You offer them the contract or the business, and so you need to manage the contract. How do you manage it? All the do's and the don'ts must be spelled out in the contract. The contract will define probably the mode of payment and everything, and when a contract can be terminated and all those that. Then you talk of deliverables. The contract will indicate when the supplier is supposed to deliver the items and the kind of items that are supposed to be delivered. And the timelines will also be assigned during this phase. Then for the fifth, the last point, you talk of to assess and refine procurement processes. Every procurement process has its own challenges. So you sit down, you look at the process as to where there are challenges, you try to bring in variations, you try to change certain things, and if you think it's okay. So you need to assess and then refine procurement processes, because things every day, new things come up, and so after each process, you need to evaluate it. You need to see if you need to do critical assessment to see that everything um, went on well. If not, you change some of your tactics or processes. Okay, before I proceed to the next stage, I would want to find out if you have any question I have said. Any question or contribution? Okay, without any question or contribution, let us move on. Isaac, Ayamberry.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, please, can you throw more light on the base and the tendering again?
Which one?
The base and the tendering.
I said I want to get there. We will get there so that when I get there, I explain it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Did you hear me?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. Yeah, Belinda, when we get there, I will explain the bidding and the tendering. When we will get there, when we get there, you will understand it properly. I don't want to repeat it because there is a portion under the key terms. So let us look at the introduction to health commodity procurement. In many countries, like ours, a procurement unit within the Ministry of Health or central medical stores manages procurement for public health supplies. So the unit purchases the appropriate quantities of quality product which are necessary for ensuring continuous product availability. So when you talk of the health commodity procurement, there is a unit that handles it and says that in most countries, it's the Ministry of Health controls it. You know, in our case, we have the Ministry of Health and Ghana Health Services, but normally they work hand in hand to ensure that items are procured, and we have normally the procurement unit. The procurement section unit is based at the central medical stores. They handle all procurement in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and then Ghana Health Services. So the unit purchases the appropriate quantities of quality product which are necessary for ensuring continuous product availability. But one thing we should bear in mind that the unit only does the procurement. They only purchase the items. But when it comes to the need identification, the kind of items that they are supposed to buy, the unit does not decide because they are not experts. And most of these things will come from the various units or will come from the various programs in the organization. So like you can have the PPAG, you can talk about the Family Health Division, you can talk about the National Malaria Program, you have the HIV prevention, the probably unit, you have polio, or you have the communicable diseases programs. All of them will be that the unit that decide on, like the oncology department will decide the kind of items, the kind of equipment they need. So the purchasing unit, okay, does not decide whether to buy paracetamol or not. No, they will be given the items. That is why we'll be doing health quantification. When you're doing the quantification of health commodity, you realize that how quantities are decided, because the quantities and everything normally decided by the experts within the Ministry of Health and Ghana Health Service. They will decide the items that need to be procured. So the procurement unit is only a channel or a medium of or the link between the users and the manufacturer. They only serve, they only play, what do you call it, a role. Their role is to ensure that the items that you have requested, they get it for you. So more of intermediaries. So let us look at the key stakeholders in the procurement process. The procurement process involves many different parties whose input helps determine the how, what, and when of procurement. So when you talk of a stakeholder, who is a stakeholder? Yes, who can assist me when you say a stakeholder? Who is a stakeholder? Hello? Can you hear me? Who is a stakeholder? Okay, if no one can explain who a stakeholder is, Fidelis. Fidelis. Fidelis, were you not part of yesterday's lecture or? Okay, you can talk.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. A stakeholder is someone or a group of people who are having an interest in either an organization or something.
Okay. Okay, so when you talk of a stakeholder is to put it as it could be an individual or group of persons who have interests in an organization, and they can affect the organization, and they can also be affected by the organization. So when we say that somebody is a stakeholder, it means that the person has interests. Their interest could be positive or negative. Their actions can impact on the organization or the reverse, or vice versa. The whatever the organization does can also affect them. And these are people who play a major role in the procurement process. So we are looking at stakeholders in the procurement process. And saying that the procurement process involves many different parties whose interests or whose input helps determine how. So who are the stakeholders who determine the how? Okay, so you come to the procurement unit. Having received orders, then they will decide how are we going to get one funding? How are we going to get the items that have been requested? So these are and then how do we deliver them? These are the how. Then when it comes to the whats, what are we going to do? That will come from the unit going to show what kind of product are we going to buy. Then somebody must also, so there are stakeholders whose concern will be hot, and that is the clinicians. What to buy is normally determined by the clinicians and then the expert in the field. And then the when of the procurement. Talk about the when. When do we get the items? When do we get funding? When do we get the items bought delivered? And there are also stakeholders that are involved in that aspect. So the first stakeholders that we can look at, we can talk of the program unit. When we talk of the program unit, realize that we have a lot of health programs that sometimes talk of the polio eradication. It's a program. We talk of HIV, we have the HIV whatever program. We have malaria control, national malaria control program. We have the family and health division. We have a lot of programs, and they usually determine what product needs to be produced to support their programs. So these units we see or we find in the health sector play a major role in their key stakeholders. when it comes to procurement, because the items you procure must be decided by them. They are the ones going to use it. So you, the procurement officer, cannot just get up and procure anything. No, you procure under the instruction, under request. Everything you do based on request. So, and these requests normally emanate from the program unit. Let's look at another important stake. Rose.
Okay, so thank you. So with this that you are saying, so why is it that when you need something at a unit and then you tell them, then a procurement officer will go and then buy whatever that he feels that it helps them financially?
That is, you see, whenever we are learning, we learn the best case scenario. As we move on, when you look at the challenges of procurement, you come to experience whatever you are talking about. Realize that it's part of that where people, because they get their share, will order even more than necessary, or will select suppliers based on their own interests. And so these are challenges that we have. But these challenges can be resolved by the clinicians, okay? And they must, for they are also part of it. Because there are some times that those up there connive with certain people to bring in some drugs that they are not that effective. They are not that effective. But you see, those are the top pushing. So for all he's being backed by somebody. Yes, there was a hand up. Whose hand was up? Is it Austin? Austin Obo.
Sir,
Yes.
is a stakeholder different from a shareholder?
Yes. A shareholder is someone who has he owns part of the business. If you become a shareholder, then you are owner, co-owner. Okay, you have your interest is different from a shareholder. So let's take an example. You and I, we are stakeholders of Garden City University, but we are not shareholders. We don't own any part of the business. So we have different interests. Your interest is to acquire knowledge. The certificate is not a certificate. We don't acquire a certificate. Certificate is just a, what do you call it? A best witness, something to testify that, in fact, you've completed BSc nursing. Because you may, assuming you are working in town, you tell somebody that, oh, I have a degree in nursing. The person will tell, what shows that you have a degree? What are you going to prove? Assuming after learning, we don't give you any certificate. So the certificate will tell the person that, yes, you have it. Other than that, anybody at all can say that they are degree holders. And so you as a stakeholder, your interest is the knowledge that you are acquiring. Me as a lecturer, my interest could be monetary. I'm teaching, and at the end of the day, I'm paid. In as much as I'm imparting knowledge, the reason why this Sunday morning I'll run away from church to come and teach is monetary. At a point in time, you can also reject the monetary, but mind you, we've talked about contract. Once you sign contract that you teach. And so when you get there, you cannot tell them you cannot teach. So you and I, we are still, but we are not shareholders. We don't own part of the business. That's the difference. So another important stakeholder group we can talk about is the National Drug Regulatory Agency. In Ghana here, we have the Standard Board, we have the Food and Drugs Board. But I don't know within the ministry if they have another, agency that decide on the national essential drugs, the drugs that Ghana we can buy. You know that there are some drugs that we've not registered them in Ghana, so those drugs cannot come in. Sometimes you get some paracetamol. I prefer those ones. They are very effective. From the UK type is dissolved. We put it in water, it dissolves, then you drink, and it's very, very effective. So sometimes I wonder why those drugs we don't have them on the market. But when you talk of so there's another important stakeholder group, the National Drug Regulatory Agency should be part of the process. Those will ensure that the procured products are registered for use in the country or have the appropriate waivers if necessary, and that the product meet quality standards. So in Ghana here, we have the Food and Drugs Board and Standard Authority. They actually handle these on behalf of the institution. So they ensure that all the drugs and then equipment that are imported into the country are wholesome, and in terms of quality, they meet the quality standard. Then another important, stakeholders in the procurement process is the funding agencies. The funding agencies are another important stakeholder in the procurement process. So whether funding comes from donors organizations, intergovernmental loans, or national treasury funds managed by the Ministry of Finance, each has procurement requirement as condition of their support. So you realize that if you've heard this, that like IMF conditionalities, when IMF could be a funding agency for some of our programs, health programs, and they have their conditionalities. You have conditions that you need to follow. And sometimes those conditionalities, you realize that it doesn't work for us well in our part of the world, but that is the condition, because when you are entering into contract, they spell out, they have their terms and conditions that you sign to. And once you append your signature, then you need to follow it to the letter. And these agencies are also powerful. They are stakeholders. Whatever we do, once their funds are involved, then they become important stakeholders, and we follow their conditions. So we have the manufacturers. Manufacturers are another important, let me put it, stakeholder groups who are part of the procurement process. So what the manufacturers do, is that with the manufacturers, they are the one to, as it is, register their products. They're supposed to register their products, not so. So when this thing is not it's only the manufacturer who can register their product. So the Ministry of Health, yes, the drug may be available somewhere. If it is not registered in Ghana, they cannot procure. The procurement department or unit cannot buy any drug or equipment that hasn't been registered in Ghana. So that is the role of the manufacturer. As they manufacture their product, they ensure that they've gone through all the processes, all the tests, or everything that they need to do for the product to be registered in the country before it can be imported. So we are done with the key stakeholder groups in the procurement process. I would like to know if there is any question before I proceed to the key terms in health commodity procurement. Okay. Without any question, let's proceed to the key terms in health commodity procurement. The first term, so those who are asking about the tendering and then the bidding, you pay attention and then you get it once and for all. When you talk of tender, tender is a documentation and initiation of a process for soliciting bids, the specification for the product, service desired, and opening the contract to the bidding process. So here, when you talk of the tender, it's a documentation and initiation. So you prepare a document with product, you define the product, you give the specifications, and then everything you want you want the seller to do, then you put it out there. You communicate to external suppliers in good standing, that I want to procure this item. These are the conditions. These are the specs. So those who are in good standing should bid. Okay. So more or less, the tender is a document. In law, so we call it the invitation. It's an offer. You give an offer to to suppliers to respond. So in their response, the bid becomes their response. So as the buyer signs the tendering document or tender signs the tender document, then the seller bids the contract. So the bid is a written offer for a quantity of goods, works, or services at a stated price based on technical specifications and other terms and conditions. Bids are submitted to a purchaser by an interested seller in response to an invitation for bids. So this one is in response to the tender. So the tender comes from the buyer. Okay, it's like a document that you send out there. I want these items. These are my conditions. These are the specs. So those who want to buy, those who want to supply those items based on my terms and conditions should respond. And in the response, that is what we call the bid. So they bid and they write officially to the buyer. Okay, based on, so they'll give you their price, the stated price, and then they'll also state everything they give is based on the technical specifications and terms and conditions spelled out by the tender document. And so this one is given to the bid is now given to the buyer. So the tender comes from the buyer and the bid comes from the seller. Please, those who are asking this person, are you okay? Because normally we confuse these items. Sometimes people tend to think that they are the same, but they are not. They are not the same. We are talking about two different things. Any question?
Sir, please, I want to understand. Let's say I'm a CEO of a company and I want to purchase vehicles for my company. So as a tender, I will state the type of vehicle I want, the specifications, the speed limit and everything that I want in that particular vehicle. Then, per what you explained there, bidder will be the various companies who will be interested to produce that car for me.
Yes.
So Toyota will come in, Honda will come in, different companies will come in with their prices and their terms and conditions. If I'm interested in any of them, I can pick one company, then I go in for the product from them, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So it's clear. So you now understand, because normally these two terms are confusing, and sometimes people use them interchangeably. They are unable to distinguish the two. All right. So the next one is the contract. Another key term we see in another key terms when it comes to the procurement process. We also have contract or framework contract. A contract is an agreement entered into by two parties for the execution of a certain activity. For example, a sale and a purchase or a provision of services. A framework contract is a general term for an agreement with a supplier that set out terms and conditions against which specific purchases can be made throughout the life of the agreement. So when it comes to the contract, having selected a contract, or maybe after the tendering process, After the tendering process, when they send a bid, you evaluate and then you select a supplier. When you select a supplier, you need to give them contract, and the contract will now stipulate, will indicate all the do's and the don'ts. That is the terms and conditions, the do's and the don'ts of both parties. And then it was also set when the contract, conditions under which the contract can be terminated or repudiated. So this one, the contract is very, very important. And that is why some companies, they have the legal department when it comes to procurement, when it comes to accepting offer, you need to. But here, we don't normally, even as individuals, there are certain decisions when you want to do, you need to talk to a lawyer. And some of these things, they resolve them. But we see lawyers as litigants, so we normally don't want to use them. That is not it. Recently, one of the lecturer was talking about, he went and bought Samsung from Electroland, and he experienced, when he sent them the television home, he had issue. It wasn't working properly. So he went to Electroland, and they were playing tricks on him every day. They were not responding. So what he did was that he informed the senior assistant registrar, academics, lawyer party of the university. And then he just wrote to them that they should respond. So the moment they got a letter from lawyer party, the following day they brought a new television. They came to change it. Because they realized that, you see, there are laws governing. There are laws governing everything we do. And so sometimes, especially when you are doing things, something of great importance, like buying land, if we some of these things, some of them, they don't charge much. We all have friends and other people who are lawyers. Sometimes when we involve them in the early stages, we wouldn't encounter most of the problems we do. We shouldn't fear them. Just go close to somebody that they just give you advice, that I want advice, that I'm buying this land, what can I do? Once they see that this time is coming from a lawyer, this is what Ghanaians will say, that you are litigant, but this is the way to go. If you don't do that, you always lose out. So when it comes to contracts, okay, this is how it works. You need to enter, you need to look at it. You don't just accept an offer. Yes, as you accept the offer, look at the pros and cons. What are the gray areas? What are the areas that can create problems from here? So in procurement, these things, that's why normally you have the legal department that you deal with. Then the next one is good manufacturing practices. It's another term that we will see. Please, just a minute. Okay, sorry. So we have another term, good manufacturing practices in procurement of health commodities. You know, health commodities are delicate, complex, and it has to be managed carefully. So when you are going to buy, you need to make sure that the manufacturer is using good manufacturing practices, where you ensure that they are using the correct ingredients. Whatever they are doing meets the standard, the ISO, that is International Standard Organizations. They have what do you call it? The standard that they set for manufacturing companies to follow. So when you are going to buy, you don't rush. You make sure that the organizations that you are dealing with, they follow those things. You don't just buy for the sake of buying. make sure that where you are buying from, they follow those good manufacturing practices. Then we have the pre-qualification, which is normally picked from World Health Organization. So you make sure that before you buy. Sometimes in countries, countries such as ours, now we do not have the technical know-how, that we do not have the right equipment to test. If you don't take, that is why we have a lot of counterfeit drugs in our system. So before you buy, you check from World Health Organization. That's what we call a pre-qualification. You make sure that you look at from the World Health Organization whether the company that you are buying from, whether the product that you are buying qualifies under World Health Organization pre-qualification. So this is a process of predetermining that a specific product from a specific manufacturer meets stated requirement. And for you to know that, since you may not have that expertise or such information, you check it from World Health Organization. And every what do you call it, manufacturer that wants their product to get to the global level will do that, will register with the World Health Organization. Because mostly people will consult, countries will consult the World Health Organization before they patronize any health commodity. So still under the key terms in health commodity procurement, we have supplier, the party that transfers goods out of its control and to a named recipient. And so sometimes you may hear this word in supply chain. When you hear this word vendor, supplier, contractor, they mean the same. They are used interchangeably depending on the sector you find yourself. So in the construction point, they will not use the supplier. When it comes to construction, they'll use the contractor. You see, when it comes to maybe supply of goods and other things, you will use a supplier or vendor. When the person is distributing equipment and other things, they use a vendor or a supplier. And so these words are used interchangeably. Then we have the direct procurement. So in procurement, we can have direct procurement. If you are doing direct procurement, it means that you are purchasing directly from the manufacturer or manufacturer's representative. So when you say then the indirect, you purchase, you buy from what? You buy the items through intermediary. So this one, when it comes to direct, you buy directly from the manufacturer or the representative of the manufacturer. Then when you talk of the indirect procurement, where you buy from intermediaries, so we have two different kinds. But hardly do you get access to the, there are few instances that manufacturers will deal directly with organizations, maybe with government, even that they want you to deal with their representatives. You know that at a point in time, I don't know if still Ibrahim Mahama is the agent for man diesel, what do you call it, cars in Africa. Okay, so at a point in time, Ibrahim Mahama was the sole, what do you call it, vendor or supplier of man diesel, man and DAF, their cars in Africa. So there was a time that a company in Kumasi purchased a lot of those trucks, mounting to almost about 200 of those trucks. And it became a topic. It was one of the things that was used against Muhammad then, that he had set up a company and the trucks, people were gossiping the trucks were for him. So at a point in time, the man, I'm very close to the man because I used to be the PA of the man. And then the man said one time he met President Muhammad, said, "My friend, go and bring me my trucks. You've bought the trucks, you didn't tell me, and Ghanaians are saying it's for me, so bring them." And this is how, these are some of the occupational hazards. Because of his brother, somebody's truck, they related to him as it being. So in those days, if you wanted to buy man diesel, you buy it from you don't buy it from Ibrahim, but then he's the one going to supply. When you make the order, it will pass through his company before you get it. And that is the indirect. So you don't buy, when it comes to the indirect, you don't buy from the company. You buy from its agents. So without any question, I'll proceed to the procurement process. Okay.
Sir, please, I have a question.
Yeah, Odun.
Okay. Sir, please, can there be any advantage or disadvantage between the direct and the indirect procurement? Because looking at this, I'm asking this question based on the Honorable Kukwajima Menu purchasing the COVID vaccine through a third party, which led to that scandal, the COVID vaccine scandal.
Yeah.
So I want to know if there's any advantage purchasing it directly or indirectly from the supplier.
You know, when it comes to some of these dealings, most companies don't want to deal with third parties. Most manufacturing companies, they have their representatives. So in the case of the Ajimamenu's own, he couldn't have dealt with the company directly because the company was not interested in us, wasn't interested in dealing with you. They were dealing with, they were dealing with either World Health Organization, either World Health Organization or other organization. Realized that this was the intermediary was coming from UAE, one of the princes, and you can see where the company is coming from. So that is how it is. For some companies, it could also mean that the one, the COVID vaccines, normally it's not the manufacturers that discovered those drugs. These were done by labs, individuals, and then the companies were manufacturing for them. So these individuals may decide how those items, or together with the company, but mind you, most of these manufacturers don't deal with third parties. They don't deal with individuals. They don't deal with countries. You buy through their agents. For instance, when you come to Ghana, look at most of the drugs that we buy from the pharmacy, like you pick Pharma. So you pick some of the drugs. You realize that Pharma is the one. You might think that they are the ones manufacturing, but you can see that produced in India, sometimes you see that produced in India for Pharma Ghana. It means that Pharma is going to be the sole distributor of that particular drug. For all you know, he initiated, okay? Or the drug may be an existing, most of the drugs that we consume, that we see that whether it is coming from NS chemists or apart from few of them that do their own manufacturing, most of them, they manufacture them from India. So they go to, in that case, they will deal directly with the manufacturer. The manufacturer will produce the item for them in their names. It means that if you want to buy, you can't buy from the manufacturer. As if the Ghana government want to buy Pococo, for whatever they call it, you can't buy it from that Indian company unless you buy it from Pharma, because they are the sole distributor. And companies will indicate that this company is the sole distributor. So if you want to go to them, you don't come to the manufacturer. And that one is set by the firms. So every manufacturing company and their terms, some may want to deal directly with government. You see, sometimes with the issue of they handling complaints and that, the company don't want to be involved in that. They want to concentrate on their core business. So when they use agents, then the agent will be dealing with you with issues that may come up so that they will be like in terms of litigations and other things, they want to avoid that. And that is why mostly and about 80 to 90% of companies don't deal with third parties or government, deal with their representative or their agent. So if you need anything. And sometimes you can have about 3-4 agents. Before, so you have first one, he's a link between a manufacturer and an other agent. Sometimes for you to get a product, you need to pass through about 4 or 5 agents. Like the items we buy, it might have passed through the hands of about 10 to 15 agents before it gets to your hand. And that is how it is. So that one, as my man is one, you cannot blame him because at that time, companies were not dealing with individuals. They weren't dealing with individual governments. And that is how most organizations are.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody, yeah, so Thomas is asking, Belinda, let me answer Thomas' question, then I come to you. Thomas is asking, the difference between intermediary from the representatives of the manufacturer. You know, some companies come to your country through their representative. So there was a difference. Okay, here is the company is like you dealing directly with the company. Yes. And that case, the representative is paid by the manufacturer. Okay. But when it comes to the intermediary buys from the manufacturer and then they do their own marketing. So the intermediary will recruit their own people to like go to Ozon's chemist. If you buy any item from Ozon's, you can see that it is manufactured by this Indian company for Ozone. So the India company will just finish manufacturing the item for Ozone. They have nothing to do with it. So Ozone is going to recruit their own marketing people, salespeople to push the product. But when it comes to a representative, it means that more or less is somebody representing the company. I want an example of a company which has a representative in Ghana. I'm yet to get one, but I will. But those representatives, like, let me take an example, Toyota Ghana. Toyota Ghana is not a subsidiary of Toyota mother company in Japan. This is a representative of Toyota in Ghana. And if you want to buy Toyota car, you know, Toyota, if you need to pay 6 months before you get them. And a lot of people don't want to do that. So they bring their vehicles. These Toyota Ghana will find money to buy at least few of them. We wanted pickup last year. We struggled well in getting. So then when we went there, the car was there. Then we picked it. The investor picked the car. The documents were not ready. Said no, when we leave, because the man told that if you leave this vehicle here, tomorrow you will not come and meet, somebody will pick it. So we had to drive the car to the yard and pack it till they brought the document. Okay. So that one is different. This is a representative. You cannot bypass them to buy. But when it comes to intermediaries, they have a lot of intermediaries. You can have a lot of them all buying from the company and selling. But then when you talk of representative, it is the company that has appointed that person to represent them in a particular country. But when it comes to intermediaries, there are some differences. Okay, the intermediary, they are independent. They do their own thing. But the representative is more or less the mouthpiece of the organization. So if a representative is in Ghana and an intermediary wants a product from that, the intermediary will still go to the representative and get that product before they distribute to the other, what do you call it? I don't know if we are okay with it. Belinda, your hand was up.
Yes, sir. Sir, please, mine is not a question. Mine is to say, I have an optometrist friend. He went to offer a course in India. Any doctor wants to set up an eye clinic. When they order the machines, they would direct the people to my friend because he is their representative here in Ghana. Then he will go and do the installations for them.
Yeah, but the guy doesn't sell the equipment.
No,
he does.
No,
Yeah,
he does the installations and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. Theophilus, Texan.
Okay, so in terms of the representatives and then the intermediary, am I right to say that the representatives, when it comes to losses, if I make losses, it affects the mother company as compared to the intermediary who actually does the business on his own? He will only go and buy in box and then come and distribute to people. If he makes losses, it actually goes to, or he actually bears the cost. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, that is it. Because like the lady said, you are more or less, you are representing the in terms of money they deal with you, but for intermediary, you buy the item and then you will distribute it at your own cost. When you make profit, you take it. When you make losses, it's your business. Normally, representatives don't sell. They only represent the interest of the organization. So let us look at the procurement process. Say that the procurement process is a decision-making process you follow when you buy a product. You usually have many options, and this means that each step must be standardized and regulated according to public laws and regulation. So the process differs from organization to organization. In the public institutions like Ghana, that we follow the processes as the process, what do you call it, developed by the procurement authority. And these days, you heard the president saying that every contract, he wants every contract to pass through the National Procurement Authority, because they are supposed to award every contract, every purchases of the government pass through them. The reason why the government is saying that is that they want it to go through the normal process. And I know where he's coming from. And this is based on what he has learned as a person when he was this previous administration. You know, in contracts, whenever you award a contract, you look at the worth of the contract. So there were contractors, there were people who got contracts, but they didn't have the financial muscle. Assuming I'm giving you a contract worth $10 million, and then they evaluate your company, your equipment, the asset and everything is around $1 million, then you don't qualify to handle that contract. So because we look at your asset, look at your insurance. Okay, so the insurance, sometimes the insurance should be worth or should be more than the contract sum. And if you cannot insure, let's say I'm giving you $15 million contract and you cannot insure up to $50 million so that in case of anything, the insurance company will pay the money. This time around, the government is being careful because there were times that people went for contract, they could not execute it because they didn't have what it takes, what they needed to have to execute those contracts. And that's why we continue to see a lot of contracts abandoned, a lot of abandoned projects all over. Because the people that went for the project didn't have that financial, didn't have the technical capacity to execute it. Okay, so maybe the caterpillar that you have just about 3 caterpillars and 2 dozers, and you want to go and construct a road that costs over 50 million. So if you look at the contractors on this big push road, you can see that these are contractors who have the resources, and this is how it's supposed to be. And so when you talk of the process, it must go through. It should be standardized and it should be regulated. It's not that anybody at all who will just come and then say that I'm a contractor, I can do, then give to the person. No. So this time around, everybody's being careful. So let us look at the steps in the health procurement process. The first step is product selection and quantification. So like definition, you need to tell us which product you want us to procure. They will send you the information from HOT. As we indicated, those who are in charge will send you that these are the items. The user department will tell you that we need these items. Go and procure for us. So they will select and give you the quantities they want before you go ahead. So after you complete the product selection and quantification process, the information is submitted to the procurement unit to obtain the correct quantities of the correct product from international, regional, or local marketplaces. So once you receive the products and its corresponding quantities, you source them. Either you go international, you go regional or local marketplaces. So when it comes to the tendering process, we have what we call the restricted tender, we have the open tender, and then the what do you call it? The global tender. And this one, when you talk of the restricted, so you restrict the tendering process to only local companies. You don't want any foreign to come in. And then you also look at the international, where any supplier anywhere in good standing can apply for it. Then after selecting and quantifying, after product selection and quantification, the next step is specifications. The procurement unit must ensure that in addition to the product information, provided program manager, including the generic name, dosage, formulation, and unit packaging requirements, suppliers must produce products that meet regulatory and shipping packaging requirements, including proof that the products are manufactured at a facility that meets good manufacturing practices, certification requirement, or have World Health Organization pre-qualification status, and that they can provide product that meets certain technical specifications, including standard for raw materials and requirement for shelf life, labeling language, and inner and outer packaging. So please, who can explain this point for less specification based on what I said? Who can explain it? Yes, who can be of help? I want your understanding, assuming you meet this test somewhere, how would you interpret it? Yeah, Ishmael.